All right, today we're cracking open a case file that's nearly 2,000 years old. We're going to follow the brilliant legal minds of the Talmud as they investigate a couple of really thorny mysteries about ancient temple offerings. Now, this isn't just some dry old law. This is a high-stakes detective story, a total labyrinth of logic, and we're going to solve it together. Let's dive in. But first, let me ask you something. Think about a time you made a mistake. Something you could fix. Now, what if you were in a situation where a single misstep, just one moment of being unfit, made that mistake permanent? A door just slammed shut, and you can never, ever reopen it. That's the core tension we're digging into today. So, here's our basic scenario. Step 1. Someone commits a sin. Let's say they accidentally eat a type of forbidden fat. Okay. Step 2. To make things right, they set aside a specific animal as an offering. But then, step 3, before the ritual can actually happen, something goes wrong that disqualifies the person from bringing that offering. The stage is now set for our first big legal puzzle. And this brings us to the crucial legal principle at the heart of our first case. It comes from the great sage Rabbi Yochanan, and it's this. Once an offering is pushed out of the system, it can never come back. It's basically a one-strike-and-you're-out rule. But you gotta wonder, just how absolute is this rule? Well, that's exactly what the sages set out to discover. And so begins case file number 1. The Talmudic detectives, they immediately start interrogating this rule, pushing it to its absolute limits with a bunch of challenging thought experiments. They're trying to see if they can find even a single loophole. So to test this rule, the sages compare two scenarios. First up, you've got the apostate, a person who chooses to abandon his faith. But, and this is key, he has the power to come back. His disqualification is self-inflicted. Then you have a person who loses their mental competence. This is something that happens to them, and they have no power to reverse it on their own. So the big question is, does this difference in who's in control actually matter? And the verdict comes back, nope, it doesn't matter one bit. Whether the person disqualified themselves or was disqualified by forces way beyond their control, the outcome is exactly the same. The moment they became unfit, that offering was permanently rejected. This is brilliant, right? It just shows you how incredibly strong this principle of no return really is. Just when you think the case is closed, Rabbi Yirmeiah throws in this incredible twist. He asks, what if the person is totally fine, but the offering itself gets temporarily disqualified? So imagine the court makes a mistake and says that the fat you ate was actually allowed. All of a sudden, your offering is totally unnecessary. But then the court realizes its mistake and takes back the ruling. Now what? An elder steps forward with the definitive answer. He says, this isn't some tricky edge case. This is the clearest example of the rule there is. And why is that? Because in the first scenarios, only the person was unfit. Here, the offering itself was directly rejected. So if the rule is absolute when just the owner is pushed out, it's completely undeniable when the offering itself gets invalidated, even just for a moment. Case closed. But our investigation is far from over. Case file number 2 shifts from permanent disqualification to something way more subtle, a real mystery. The power of improper intent. Okay, so here's the baseline. Generally speaking, if the priest has the wrong intention while he's slaughtering an animal, the offering is still valid. But there are two famous exceptions, the sin offering, which is for a very specific transgression, and the paschal offering for Passover. For these two, the right intent is everything. And this is where our mystery really begins. The sage Ben Azai, he says he has a tradition from 72 elders, and he adds a third offering to that exception list, the burnt offering. And the Talmudic detectives are just stumped. I mean, the sin and paschal offerings, they have clear reasons for being so strict. But the burnt offering? It's a more general, voluntary offering. There's no obvious reason for this rule. So the central question becomes, how in the world did Ben Azai know this? What happens next is just this breathtaking, high-speed chase through a labyrinth of pure logic. The sages try, one after another, to reverse engineer Ben Azai's reasoning. They are convinced there has to be a deductive proof, and they pull out every single tool in their logical toolkit to try and find it. Their first tool out of the box is textual analysis. They comb through the biblical verses, just scrutinizing everything, looking for some subtle word or turn of phrase that could be the key to unlocking this whole mystery. And they find a clue. The verse says, it is a burnt offering. They figure that word it implies it has to be exclusively for that purpose. It's a brilliant deduction, but it's quickly shot down.
The same word, it, also appears for guilt offerings, and those are valid with improper intent. So the theory just collapses, dead end.
But they're not deterred. They move right on to detective tool number 2, the powerful a fortiori inference. The logic here is so simple and elegant. If something is true in an easier situation, then it must be even more true in a harder one. So they build the argument. A sin offering is eaten by the priests, right? That makes it a little less stringent than a burnt offering, which is consumed entirely by fire on the altar. So they reason, if even the less strict sin offering is disqualified by improper intent, then the much stricter burnt offering should be disqualified all the more so. It seems like a totally airtight case. But again, a refutation. A sin offering is unique because it atones for a specific sin. A burnt offering doesn't do that. Their purposes are just too different, so you can't compare them like that. The comparison is flawed. Another dead end. All right, time for the final tool in the box, finding a common element. The strategy here is to look at the 2 known exceptions, the sin and paschal offerings, find what they have in common, and then see if that shared property also applies to the burnt offering. But the refutation cuts deep. It turns out the true unique common element isn't just that they're holy, it's that the sins connected with both of those offerings carry the severe spiritual punishment of this penalty of being cut off from the community and from God. The burnt offering has no connection to that at all. And with that, every single logical path is blocked. The detectives are completely out of leads. So after this absolutely exhaustive investigation, where does that leave us? I mean, if logic can't explain Benazai's ruling, what possibly can? The conclusion is both really surprising and, honestly, profound. The final verdict is in. The sages conclude that Ben Azai didn't deduce this rule at all. He knew it because it was a tradition, a piece of legal knowledge that was passed down from teacher to student, all the way from Moses at Sinai. His certainty wasn't based on some clever argument. It was based on the authority of an unbroken chain of transmission. But wait, here comes the final twist, the one that really reframes this whole thing. The Talmud suggests that when later rabbis tried to create these logical proofs, they weren't actually trying to discover the truth. They already knew the truth from tradition. They were crafting these logical puzzles purely as an educational exercise, quote, to sharpen the minds of his students. The entire intellectual gauntlet, that was the lesson. And this leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The sages chased down every single dead end. They tested every hypothesis, and in the end, they learned that the answer wasn't found in their own deductions. But in doing so, they sharpened their minds, they clarified their thinking, and they mastered the tools of their trade. Which really makes you wonder, in the quest for truth, is the journey sometimes more important than the destination?